My dear brothers and sisters, I am grateful that the Lord has blessed me to speak with you.
In a moment that no one saw coming, Russell M. Nelson, the legendary and revered leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, appeared on live TV, visibly emotional, with tears streaming down his face. Then, he made a shocking announcement: his resignation. For a man who has guided millions with unwavering conviction, this unexpected decision sent shockwaves across the religious world. But what led to this unexpected decision? Was this a long time coming, or did something recently trigger his choice? Was it health concerns? Internal pressures within the church? Or something far more personal? Join us as we unravel the possible reasons behind this historic moment, explore the controversies surrounding his leadership, and ask the questions everyone's afraid to ask. For a man who has been a titan in both the operating room and the spiritual realm, the mere whisper of retirement from President Russell M. Nelson sends waves of mixed emotions across the globe. On one hand, you can almost hear the collective sigh of relief. The man deserves a break. On the other hand, there's a deep sense of dread. What will we do without him? After all, this is a man who has witnessed some of the most transformative moments in human history: 2 world wars, the rise of digital technology, and cultural shifts that would make anyone's head spin. Through it all, he's remained a steady hand, literally and metaphorically. But even legends need rest. At 100 years old, Nelson has earned every right to kick back and enjoy some well-deserved downtime. The question is, will he? And if he does, what comes next for the LDS Church under new leadership? Regardless of whether he retires or not, one thing is certain: Russell M. Nelson's legacy is untouchable. He's not just a man who changed lives. He's a man who saved them, both physically and spiritually. From pioneering medical advancements to leading one of the world's largest religious organizations, his contributions span far beyond what most people achieve in 10 lifetimes. Before he became the 17th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Russell M. Nelson was, quite literally, a lifesaver. And we're not talking about a guy who just dabbled in medicine. No, Nelson was a cardiac surgeon so brilliant that if medical achievements were Olympic events, he'd have more gold medals than Michael Phelps. Nelson built his own heart-lung bypass machine. He crafted life-saving machinery and used this device to perform the first open-heart surgery west of the Mississippi River, on an adult with an atrial septal defect, no less. He was only the 3rd surgeon in the entire United States to pull off such a feat successfully. In March 1956, Nelson performed the first successful pediatric cardiac operation at Salt Lake General Hospital, now University of Utah Hospital. The patient? A 4-year-old girl with tetralogy of Fallot, a complex congenital heart defect that sounds as terrifying as it is difficult to fix. Because Nelson apparently doesn't believe in half measures, he also pioneered surgical interventions for tricuspid regurgitation, a condition where blood flows backward into the heart's right atrium. Over his medical career, he performed over 7,000 surgeries. Among those were high-profile cases like an operation on President Spencer W. Kimball and a woman pregnant with twins who had a tumor near her heart. So, when we say Nelson has saved countless lives, we're not being hyperbolic, we're being factual. After years of performing successful surgeries, Nelson traded his scrubs for scripture and stepped into a role no one saw coming: leading a global religious community. As president of the LDS Church, Nelson has overseen some significant changes. From updated temple policies to efforts aimed at making the church more inclusive, his leadership has been anything but stagnant. He's been a reformer with a scalpel-like precision for cutting through outdated practices and introducing modernized approaches. But let's not pretend his presidency has been all sunshine and rainbows. Like any leader of a global organization, Nelson has faced his share of controversies. Whether it's debates over church policies or criticism from outside observers, his tenure hasn't been without its challenges. Could these controversies be fueling the retirement rumors? Or is it simply time for him to rest after decades of relentless service? Even the most revered leaders occasionally find themselves navigating choppy waters, and Russell M. Nelson, the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is no exception. Despite his lofty position, Nelson's tenure hasn't been all celestial choirs and glowing halos. For some within the church, his leadership has sparked more head-scratching than him singing. One of the most polarizing moments of his leadership was the 2015 policy that left many members of the church feeling like they'd been hit by a doctrinal curveball. In 2015, the church introduced a policy that labeled same-sex couples as apostates. To make matters worse, their children were barred from baptism unless they reached adulthood and formally disavowed their parents' relationship. Kids were practically caught in the crossfire of doctrinal politics. The backlash was swift and fiery. For many members, this policy felt less like divine guidance and more like a controversial decision that deepened divisions within the church. Inspiration and more like a PR nightmare wrapped in a theological enigma. Families were torn, faith was shaken, and social media lit up with countless debates. Fast forward to 2019, and the church announced a reversal of this controversial policy. This should have been a sigh of relief, right? Well, not so much. While some members applauded the change, others couldn't help but feel like the damage had already been done. It's hard to unring a bell, especially when that bell has reverberated through the lives of countless families. For critics, the reversal raised questions about the decision-making process at the top. Was this a case of divine course correction or human miscalculation? And why did it take 4 long years to reverse a policy that had caused so much pain? The fallout from this episode has lingered like an awkward silence after a bad joke. Some members left the church entirely, unable to reconcile their faith with what they saw as an unkind and exclusionary policy. Others stayed, but with a lingering sense of disillusionment. As for the church's future? Only time will tell if lessons have been learned or if history is destined to repeat itself. But with the recent controversy happening, it seems as though they haven't. Trans writes. In a move that has stirred more than just the proverbial pot, President Russell M. Nelson has once again reiterated the church's firm stance against LGBTQ+ relationships and identities. Unsurprisingly, this has not gone down well with many, both inside and outside the church. The church's new rules, which seem to have been written with a flair for exclusion, take things up a notch. Not only do they double down on an existing rule preventing transgender individuals from being baptized, but they also add a laundry list of new restrictions. Transgender members are now barred from working with children, serving as priests or teachers, or even staying overnight at youth camps. And if you thought that was the end of it, it's not. Trans members are now required to use single-occupancy restrooms at church meeting houses. If such restrooms aren't available, a trusted person must stand guard outside to ensure no one else enters while the trans individual uses the facilities. Because apparently nothing says, "Welcome to our faith," like being treated like an imminent security threat. Naturally, these policies have sparked murmurs. Many members have expressed their concerns, including Hall, a transgender member who shared her frustration with these new rules. "I'd attend church in dress, shoes, and makeup and be required to sit with a bunch of men wearing suits," Hall said. "It would put a target on me as someone who is severely off-script." But what really frustrates Hall isn't just the awkward seating arrangement. It's the underlying message of these policies, that transgender members are somehow a danger to others. It's dehumanizing and far too toxic to handle for members who are still in the process of reconciling their gender identity with their faith, she added. And honestly, can you blame her? Do you feel being told you need a chaperone to use the bathroom is less about safety and more about reinforcing harmful stereotypes? Let us know what you think. But Hall remains skeptical about the trajectory of change within the church. She draws parallels to its previous ban on ordaining African Americans, which was eventually rescinded after years of criticism and social evolution. If this trajectory of exclusion continues, more people could leave the faith, Hall warned. It's going to be a while before a legitimate social policy change occurs in the church. If that continues, there is going to be generational loss because young people are not going to accept these draconian policies. And she has a point. Younger generations are increasingly vocal about inclusivity and equality, and policies like these feel like relics from a less enlightened era. For Hall, the solution is simple. All of this is completely avoidable if only the church can simply say we love you and we'll find ways to include you. But will that happen anytime soon? The jury's still out. The church has a history of moving at glacial speed when it comes to social change, if it moves at all. And while some members remain hopeful for a more inclusive future, others are bracing themselves for more of the same. So, what do you think? Is this just another chapter in the church's long history of wrestling with modernity, or is it time for a rewrite of the entire book? Because if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that this conversation is far from over. Speculation and rumors. Now, at over 100 years old, Nelson has defied the odds, maintaining a schedule that would leave even younger people clutching their calendars in exhaustion. Many observers are linking this emotional public appearance as a clue to something deeper. Is his health faltering, or is there more to the story? Some observers have raised eyebrows, suggesting that Nelson might be considering retirement due to underlying health concerns. After all, carrying the weight of leadership for so long is no small feat, and even the most resilient among us eventually feel the toll. But is this really about health, or are we reading too much into all this? And then there's the second theory. Could internal disagreements within the church's leadership be at play? At play? It's no secret that any organization, no matter how noble its mission, occasionally encounters friction behind closed doors. Could Nelson have found himself caught in the crossfire of differing visions for the future? A rift among governing authorities might explain his decision to step back, but alas, the details remain as elusive as the last slice of pie at a potluck. Of course, there's always the simplest explanation. Maybe it's just personal. After a century of life and decades of public service, perhaps Nelson decided it was time to trade the spotlight for family dinners and quiet afternoons. Who could blame him? A man can only attend so many meetings before yearning for the comforts of home and the laughter of loved ones. Whatever the reason, one thing is certain: Nelson's legacy remains intact. Whether health concerns, leadership dynamics, or a heartfelt desire for family time prompted his decision, he's earned every bit of respect and admiration. And if we're lucky, he'll share his secrets to longevity, because let's face it, we'd all love to know how he's managed to outpace us all. The $100 billion question. When it comes to religion, faith is often the currency of choice. But for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it seems that dollars, lots and lots of dollars, are also in the mix. Under the leadership of President Russell M. Nelson, the church has faced increasing scrutiny over its jaw-dropping financial portfolio, reportedly valued at over $100 billion. Naturally, this revelation has left critics and curious onlookers scratching their heads and asking, "What's all that cash doing just sitting around?" The calls for financial transparency have grown louder than a Sunday choir rehearsal, with some questioning why the church isn't more forthcoming about how these funds are being used. To be fair, managing $100 billion isn't exactly the same as balancing your monthly grocery budget. There are investments to oversee, charitable endeavors to fund, and presumably, a very large piggy bank to polish. But critics argue that the church's financial opacity leaves too much room for speculation. Are these billions earmarked for charitable causes? Future temples? A rainy day in Salt Lake City? Or perhaps a secret plan to colonize Mars? Okay, probably not that last one, but $100 billion can spark the imagination. The church has defended its financial practices, stating that these funds are prudently managed to ensure long-term stability and support its global mission. In other words, they're playing the long game, though some might say it's a very long game. And while it's true that the church has made significant contributions to humanitarian efforts over the years, critics argue that a little more transparency wouldn't hurt. After all, even Moses gave updates on where the manna was coming from. So, could mounting pressure from these controversies have played a role in Nelson's emotional resignation? The emotional exit. In the world of leadership, where every decision is scrutinized and every word dissected, even the most steadfast individuals can feel the heat. But could the weight of these controversies have played a role in what some are calling his emotional resignation? First, let's set the stage. Leadership is no cakewalk, unless you're imagining a cake that's on fire and surrounded by bees. As the president of a major institution, Nelson's role came with high stakes, high expectations, and, high levels of public scrutiny. From policy shifts to public statements, his every move was met with applause from some and raised eyebrows from others. And let's face it, no leader escapes unscathed when they're navigating a sea of differing opinions. Now, controversies, the spice of leadership life. Whether they stem from doctrinal debates, organizational changes, or external pressures, these challenges were enough to keep any leader up at night. And while Nelson's resilience and commitment were evident throughout his tenure, one has to wonder, did the mounting pressure start to feel like that one Jenga tower you just know is going to topple any second? Stepping down from such a prominent role isn't exactly like leaving a book club because someone keeps spoiling the endings. It's a big deal. And when emotions are involved, it's clear that the decision wasn't made lightly. Could it be that Nelson, after years of navigating choppy waters, finally decided it was time to pass the torch? Perhaps he realized that even the strongest leaders need a moment to breathe. Or maybe he just wants to finally rest. Of course, it's worth noting that leadership transitions are often multifaceted. While controversies may have played a part, they're rarely the sole reason for such a significant decision. Life is complex, and so are the motivations behind stepping away from the spotlight. Still, it's hard to ignore the possibility that the relentless weight of public scrutiny might have added an extra nudge toward the exit door. In the end, whether it was controversy, personal reflection, or simply a desire for some well-deserved downtime, President Russell M. Nelson's resignation marks the end of an era. And while we may never know all the factors behind his decision, one thing is certain: leadership is not for the faint of heart, or for those who don't appreciate a good plot twist. Now let's address the question everyone's tiptoeing around: what happens to the LDS Church when President Russell M. Nelson retires? The future of the Church. President Nelson, known for his sweeping reforms and steady hand, has been a transformative figure for the Church. But let's face it, nobody stays at the helm forever. So, what happens when he retires? Will the next leader continue steering the ship in the same direction, or will they yank the wheel and send the Church sailing into uncharted waters? Unlike some organizations where leadership transitions involve months of speculation, secret ballots, and maybe a little corporate drama, the Church has a succession plan so straightforward it could teach the rest of the world a thing or two. When the prophet leaves, the senior apostle, based on length of service in the quorum of the 12 apostles, steps into the role. Right now, that senior apostle is President Dallin H. Oaks. And if you're wondering whether he's ready for the role, the honest truth is, he has been preparing for decades. Between his legal mind and spiritual insight, he's got more qualifications than most CEOs. But do you also think he has big shoes to fill? President Nelson has been nothing short of revolutionary. This is a man who became prophet at age 93, and then proceeded to lead with the energy of someone half his age. Under his leadership, we've seen major changes to our church: ministering instead of home teaching, new temples announced, home-centered gospel study models, and a renewed emphasis on using the full name of the church. And let's not forget Come Follow Me, a program that has revolutionized scripture study for families worldwide. Whoever follows him will undoubtedly inherit a rich legacy, but also some pretty big shoes to fill. But here's the thing about revolutions: they're hard to sustain. The next leader will face a tough choice: keep pushing forward or hit pause to consolidate what's already been done. Both options come with risks. Push too hard, and you might alienate those who are still catching their breath from all the recent changes. Slow down too much, and you risk losing momentum in an era where religious institutions are already struggling with declining membership and relevance. Members are undoubtedly asking themselves, will the church continue to grow internationally? How will it address thorny issues like LGBTQ+ inclusion and gender equality? What about its relationship with younger generations who are increasingly skeptical of organized religion? These questions don't come with easy answers, but they're not going away anytime soon. The next leader will have to navigate them carefully while balancing tradition with progress. A tightrope act if there ever was one. But if there's one thing President Nelson has taught us during his tenure, it's that change is not just inevitable, it's invigorating. He's shown us that revelation is ongoing and that God's work isn't stagnant. So, when the time comes for a new prophet to lead, we can expect that same spirit of progression to continue. Will there be more adjustments to church programs? Almost certainly. Will there be surprises? You bet. But if history has taught us anything, it's that these changes are always aimed at helping us grow closer to Christ. So even if you're someone who resists change, take heart, it's probably all part of a divine plan. While it's natural to wonder about the future of church leadership, perhaps the more pressing question is this: what are we doing in the meantime? Are we prepared to sustain whoever is called as the next prophet? Are we deepening our faith so that no matter who leads, our testimony remains unshaken? Because here's the thing, prophets guide us, but they don't live our lives for us. Whether it's President Nelson or his successor at the helm, our responsibility remains the same: to follow Christ and live his gospel. So, what's the fate of the church when President Russell M. Nelson retires? In short, it's in good hands, God's hands. The church has weathered nearly 2 centuries of leadership transitions, and each time, it has not only survived but thrived. Whether the new president opts for bold reforms or a return to basics, one thing is certain: all eyes will be on Salt Lake City. But if you've been tuning into the recent talks by President Russell M. Nelson, you may have noticed something striking. He's not just sitting around waiting for the next in line to take over. He's been dropping pearls of wisdom and prophecies to prepare the people for what's ahead. So what's his message? And how's the world reacting to it? According to Prophet Nelson, the fierce attacks of the adversary are intensifying. Think of it as a celestial alarm clock, loud, persistent, and impossible to snooze. But President Nelson isn't just waving a red flag and yelling, "Danger ahead!" like some spiritual traffic cop. He's also handing out a battle plan, complete with step-by-step instructions for dodging the adversary's curveballs. And let's face it, we could all use a little divine strategy these days. So, what's on the prophet's to-do list for us? President Nelson advises us to study with the desire to believe, and let the Lord guide us on a journey of spiritual discovery. This simply means, dust off those scriptures. This isn't about skimming through a few verses while half watching your favorite Netflix show. No, this is about diving in headfirst, highlighters blazing, and letting the words sink deep into your soul. Think of it as spiritual weightlifting. Every verse you study is like doing a rep at the gym, building up your testimony muscles. And let's be honest, we all want to be spiritually strong when the adversary comes knocking. His next step? Make time for the Lord. This is the one thing we never seem to have enough time for. Between work, school, social media rabbit holes, and binge-watching the latest hit series, our schedules are jam-packed. But President Nelson is clear: if you're not carving out time for the Lord, you're missing the point. This isn't about squeezing in a quick prayer between meetings or scrolling through inspirational quotes on Instagram. It's about intentionally setting aside moments to connect with God, to pray, meditate, and listen. Think of it as a divine date night. After all, relationships only thrive when you invest time into them, and your relationship with God is no exception. The third step is to make and keep covenants. Covenants are like spiritual contracts with Heavenly Father, unifying promises that bind us to Him with purpose and action. And according to President Nelson, the more unified you are with God, the stronger you'll be in standing up to the adversary. It's kind of like joining a celestial gym membership. You commit to showing up, putting in the work, and following through on your promises. And in return, you get access to divine strength, guidance, and blessings that make you spiritually unshakable. Sounds like a pretty sweet deal. President Nelson isn't delivering these messages just for kicks. He knows we're living in what many call the last days. And while that phrase might sound like the title of a post-apocalyptic thriller, it's really a call to action, a reminder that we need to be spiritually prepared for whatever comes our way. President Nelson is doing everything he can to help us stand strong in these turbulent times. His words aren't just prophetic, they're practical. They're like a survival guide for navigating life's spiritual minefields. Now, let's shift gears for a moment. Have you ever wondered if certain people are divinely prepared for greatness? You know, like they've been handpicked by God for a specific role? If so, President Nelson might just be a perfect example. This man traveled to 35 nations, building bridges of understanding and issuing invitations that are nothing short of historic. One prophecy often linked to President Nelson involves his leadership during times of significant change. And let's be real, since 2018, change has been his middle name. From guiding the church through a global pandemic to emphasizing personal revelation and temple worship, he's been steering the ship through uncharted waters with grace and determination. During the April 2018 General Conference, President Nelson said something that still resonates today. One of the things the Spirit has repeatedly impressed upon my mind since my new calling as president of the church is how willing the Lord is to reveal His mind and will. We can all agree He's a great man. But what makes someone destined for greatness? Is it charisma? Vision? An unshakable sense of purpose? For President Nelson, it seems to be all of the above, and then some. His leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's about fulfilling promises made long before any of us were around to see them unfold. Carrying the faith and the flock. What do you think the life of a leader looks like? Glamorous, effortless, and stress-free, right? Wrong. Now imagine amplifying that by leading a global religious community. That's not just a job. It's a calling with a side of sleepless nights and a heaping portion of existential pondering. For someone like Nelson, at the helm of millions of faithful followers, the responsibility is nothing short of monumental. It's not just about showing up on Sundays with a polished sermon and an inspiring smile. No, it's about navigating the choppy waters of faith in an increasingly secular world, where Netflix and chill is often prioritized over prayer and reflection. Add to that the tightrope act of blending modern values with age-old religious traditions, and you've got yourself a full-blown juggling act. But Nelson doesn't just carry this weight, he seems to embrace it. He's been vocal about his profound love for the church and its members, which is both heartwarming and slightly intimidating. Imagine loving your job so much that retirement feels like bad news. For most of us, the thought of retiring to a beachside hammock with a piña colada is the ultimate dream. For Nelson, however, it's different. Of course, this has sparked some chatter among observers. Surely he'll retire eventually, they say. No one can keep going forever. But Nelson's steadfast devotion suggests otherwise. He seems to be the type who would rather wear out than leave. So, is retirement truly on the table for Nelson? Whether he retires or not, one can't help but admire his commitment to carrying both the faith and the flock, all while keeping his shoulders remarkably straight under such an emotional load. And hey, if he ever does decide to hang up his leadership hat, he could always write a book titled How to Lead Millions Without Losing Your Mind. It'd be an instant bestseller. Even if he does retire, something tells us he won't be sitting still for long. After all, legends don't rest, they just find new ways to make an impact. Thanks for watching, fam! If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe